Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a mom of three, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant who works for yoga teachers. And this podcast was created for you so that you can connect to the information and inspiration every single week and feel supported as you navigate being a yoga teacher and also being an entrepreneur. Connected yoga teachers, I feel like it has been so long since I sat down to talk to you, and it has only been a week. But a lot is happening if you're listening to this episode in real time with everything coronavirus. A lot is happening in our lives here. I feel like we're having to really think outside the box of how can we self-isolate and still look after ourselves and our loved ones at the same time. So a few things, we figured out that we can visit with the boys who are not living here. We can, stand 6 feet apart outside and visit because the weather is warming up a little bit. That's one silver lining. And I have to be really honest, as I record this for you, it also feels like a really challenging week. I've talked to family and to a really close friend who are dealing with illness outside of the coronavirus, and all of that on top of this makes me feel like we have to find ways of supporting people when we can't just drive over and go and visit them. And it's been really tough. It's been really heavy. And at the same time, I just feel like we have to think outside the box. So today's episode is all about how a yoga teacher was thinking outside the box. And I really wanted to bring her on the podcast to tell us how she did a very different yoga studio model. So a collective yoga studio model. And just as I said last week, this episode could also apply to something done online. So I've done previous episodes about yoga studios, and we know that they're run in many different ways. Some of them have a single owner who may or may not be a yoga teacher. Some are partnerships between different yoga teachers. Some are a franchise. And this week, we're exploring a totally different model for a yoga studio, the collective yoga studio model. Jenifer Parker has been running a yoga studio in Wellington, New Zealand for the last 10 years, and for part of that time was running a collective yoga studio. She has a wealth of information to share on the legality and logistics of setting up and running a collective. She explains how a collective works, what you need to form it, as well as some of the details of the operations and what it really takes to run a yoga studio in this way. All of the show notes are ready for you at theconnectedyogateacher.com/163. And there you can find the links that we talk about along with clickable timestamps so you can easily go back to any specific point in each and every episode. Before we get into today's episode, I want to say a huge shout out of thank you to Renee Claire, who has done a lot of work in the last couple of weeks and sticking with it as well. She had this idea that we could rally and round up our yoga teachers who are teaching online classes. And when she first pitched the idea to me, I was kind of tired. And I told her, I don't know how we would do that. And she just kept at it and she kept going with it. And that idea is now live on our website, and it is slowly morphing into an even better idea. So thank you so much, Renee, for sticking with this. I will make sure to link to this in the show notes. So if you have an online yoga class and you want anyone from around the world, our other connected yoga teachers or students, to be able to attend yoga with you, make sure to add your name to that growing list of amazing yoga teachers. And here is a shout out to Renee. And thank you so much, Renee, for leaving this audio review.
Hey, Shannon, this is Renee Claire. I just listened to your Q&A episode, and I decided to get brave and leave you a voice message. I just wanted to let our listeners know how grateful I've been to be able to do one-on-one sessions with you over this past year and a half. You've allowed space for me to be creative and just supported me as I've tried on a few different niches and taken on lots of projects. And you're always the first to let me know or just gently kind of tap my shoulder and say, maybe that's not in alignment with where you're going. So, but I'm really pumped for the niche that you've introduced me to now, and I can't wait to see what I do with it this next year. I also want to just thank you for allowing just this beautiful space for us yoga teachers to come together. And yeah, from Texas to California, with you being in Canada, it's been a special treat to have someone just always being my cheerleader because I'm everybody else's cheerleader. Okay, I am so grateful for you. I can't wait to see what you do in 2020 for us. Bye.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Renee. So sweet of you. Thank you for all that you're doing in this world. Connected Yoga Teachers, you will get to hear from Renee very soon on the podcast as she talks about another way that we have worked together recently. Also, a huge shout out of thanks to our regular sponsor, Schedulicity. Schedulicity has really stepped forward and helped our yoga teachers who are in North America. Those are the yoga teachers who can sign up for this online scheduling software. With everything going on right now, if you're listening in real time, Schedulicity has waived all fees for yoga teachers who sign up for their software until July. So let's hear our hot tip of the week from the team over at Schedulicity.
Hello, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is Jamie with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Sometimes people assume that a career in yoga means only being a yoga teacher. And while you may spend a lot of time teaching group classes, there are so many different ways to market your skills. You might offer one-on-one training or online consulting sessions, as well as various workshops or retreats. When you use Schedulicity, you manage your group classes and one-on-one services in one place, opening up your schedule to the many possibilities in your yoga career.
Thank you so much, Schedulicity, for all the work that you do and also for bringing the podcast to our listeners each and every week. Okay, Connected Yoga Teachers, I am super excited to introduce you to Jenifer Parker. She is the Director of Healium, a yoga studio within the context of a holistic health collective in Wellington, New Zealand. She's been teaching yoga for 24 years in the Krishnamacharya lineage, with emphasis in therapeutic applications and recent trainings in postural patterning and in contractile fields. Along with her co-founder Sylvia, Jenifer provides vibrant and fun yoga, Pilates, and belly dance classes that are designed to develop radical acceptance and self-awareness. They also offer corporate yoga classes and private lessons with a focus on a lighthearted and non-dogmatic approach. So let's find out more about how we could think outside the box and possibly create a collective yoga studio. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, Jenifer. It's great to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this. Maybe a little overexcited.
That's good. Before we dig in and talk about a different yoga studio model, I'd like to hear, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Well, that's actually a pretty broad question. I've been a full-time yoga teacher for about 20 years. And my market if you want to call it that, has largely been people over 40 and also people with, sort of different unique therapeutic needs. And a lot of my training and everything was from before we had sort of Yoga Alliance and therapy organizations and so on. So it was all done by apprenticeship. So that's another side of what I've done is I've apprenticed teachers over the years, training them sort of outside of that system for time alongside it. So we would apprentice and then they could fill out those forms and we would square it all up. And then they could join. But now it's more of I have to file all this paperwork. And so just great, I'm still apprenticing people, but now we're kind of outside of the system. And the other thing I do is I do a lot of helping people understand their business models around teaching yoga and around wellness businesses in general. And my sort of new stretch area that I'm going into now is I'm working with some friends to form a charity. So this is my first time on the board of a charity organization that is about basically taking educational research and emotional intelligence research and creating evidence-based practice to educate children through yoga and other techniques, emotional resilience and EQ and emotional awareness. But it's a sort of a full circle process where we have aspects that will be teaching teachers how to use these skills for themselves to prevent burnout, to then teach the children so that you have like this sort of integrated classroom, and then also to teach the parents and families and communities so that everybody's kind of getting on the page of what this emotional resilience is. And it's a really big dream and a big project with lots of different elements. And my friend Sarah Warnock is the head of that, and she's working on her master's and her PhD in that research. So that's part of what the charity is utilizing as its foundation, is her research and her work. And we're developing that. So I'm learning a lot in stretching into what are the formations of charity, what is the local law, what are all the designations, and thankfully not alone, because of course Sarah is sort of our primary with the idea, but we also have two other women who are also yoga teachers, but also professionals in government, in accounting and law, who are helping us form and shape so that we can actually deliver this into schools and into the community in effective ways. So really exciting. We've had our first meeting. So our next meeting is in February. So we're like, okay, we'll get there. Just one little step at a time.
That's amazing. Yeah. It sounds like a fantastic thing. And I can see how it is, like you said at the beginning of that it's this new stretch. And so it's working some new things, learning some new things, I'm sure. And
yeah,
it sounds like a great cause. So tell me about, well, first of all, I just also want to touch back on that you've been a yoga teacher, full-time yoga teacher for 20 years, you said. So that's like, you're an experienced teacher, especially in the world of yoga, excuse me, right now, where we see a lot more new teachers coming in. So
yeah.
What is the model that you're currently doing with your yoga studio, and why have you chosen that?
So we're currently using a collective model, which utilizes the normal sort of corporate system, sort of like an LLC in the US, limited liability corporation or company. So you have directors who own shares in the company, and then that forms the basis of the collective. So the collective model, I really, really like it because what it does is it creates less administrative work and more opportunity for people to work together and to have the outreach that they want. One of the things that happens to a lot of yoga teachers, and it has a lot to do with how yoga is presented, in some cases in big media, things like Yoga Journal and things like that, but also then how now with Instagram and Facebook and all this, how people are presenting yoga, which is it's this very luxurious lifestyle where I wear comfortable clothes and teach yoga. And that is 10% of the lifestyle.
So true.
And so I try to tell people, if you're going into teaching yoga, it's like, it's not the image. And what then people discover is that it is, 90% administrative work. It's planning and marketing and accounting and checking your legals and keeping up with everything. And it's a lot of that. Like any business, it's a lot of running a business. And a lot of people don't enjoy that. And a lot of people find that there's skills that they excel at and skills that they don't. And to give a sort of an example, I find that there's 4 main areas of work that are part of running a business, which is your marketing, your accounting and legal, your administrative, and your what I call client experience, which includes the teaching, but is also how your administration, accounting, and marketing all of those things impact the student and your engagement with the student at every level of your business. And having sort of awareness of of those impacts, so that you have the client experience having the experience that you want them to have, so that there's no incongruities. And most people are quite good at 2 of 4 jobs. So they might be really good at client experience in terms of the teaching and the interaction and the marketing as well. That's kind of the 2 that a lot of people are quite good at now, I've noticed. But they're not so good at legal and accounting, and not so good at keeping their admin running, which can let things sort of fall through the cracks, or get people in trouble financially, legally, or otherwise. So the benefit of forming a collective model is that there are yoga teachers out there who are really good at admin and legal accounting, but terrible at marketing.
Right.
And so there are people who are good at administration and client experience, but marketing and legal and accounting are bad. So it's really about understanding that there is a lot of work in a yoga business, and that if you're going to start a studio or work in the community, probably the best way to do it is to find some friends and share the load.
Right.
The biggest barrier to that right now is that people are very afraid. They're afraid of their stuff being stolen. They're afraid of clients being stolen, ideas. I don't even know. And I just am like, the reality is there's so much material that like we can just talk and choose to, you take on that and I'll take on this or whatever. And I found, even with my friend Sarah and her charity, it's like she loves to teach children. She is a school teacher, trained school teacher, as well as a yoga teacher. And she loves to teach children. When people say, "Oh, you're so great, Jenifer, you should teach children's yoga," I'm like, no, go away. I like children, but I do not like to teach children yoga because it's a completely different skill set. But Sarah's like, I love to teach children yoga. And when I see her teach yoga, I'm like, wow, she makes it look so easy. And that's a thing where it's like, you don't have to be in competition. And she teaches adults too. So there are times where it's like, oh, I can't teach this. Can you teach it? I know I can go to her and she can take it on. And that's the other part of it. Does form a community of people that you grow together, you work together, and you trust. And it does alleviate sort of the pressure of, I have to do all this work. I have to reinvent the wheel every time. And every person who comes out of my teacher training, which might be 20, 30, or 40 people, we're all reinventing our own little vehicle. Whereas actually you guys could just get together and form a vehicle together.
Right.
And you'll get down the road faster.
Oh, that's such a good point. And I like how you brought up that people are fearful. Like, oftentimes we see other new yoga teachers as the competition, when really that collaboration can, like you said, move people forward even faster. I see this in the work that I do. When I embrace working with other people who work as a consultant or a coach for yoga teachers, we really, I see that as a flourishing relationship, where I've reached out to some people and they're like, I'm not interested in working with you. You're my competition. So like, okay, well, it's pretty fun. Like most people who I've reached out to have said, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. And I think that there's a fear between sort of the young ones. I've also found that there's a fear of us who've been around for a long time. There's an intimidation factor. I actually remembered when I was living in the States for a brief period in between my 2 New Zealand stints, I would send out my resume and I was just either not getting any response, or the responses would be like, no, like really negative. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a bit weird. But what I found out when I came back here and a friend of mine read the resume, she's like, that resume is really intimidating. It's just intimidating. So part of it is that like when you have, and I don't even have a resume anymore, I have a CV. So it's like 6 pages long and it has all the workshops that I've created and all this. And I'm like, oh. And so there's this sort of duality of like, I get frustrated when the new ones kind of undercut the market or do sort of funny things that they don't know they're doing. but I'm like, okay, that's just where they are, and I want to forge the relationship as opposed to criticize. But it does go the other way, that a lot of them are like, oh, she's just this, she's super intimidating and she's a know-it-all and she doesn't value what I bring to the table. And so there are these misunderstandings as well of just, I mean, it's almost like the okay boomer issue, where it's like, we just have different points of view, but it's okay. That's just one of those things that if it's there, then you can kind of go, okay, where is that inside myself where I'm feeling that fear or discomfort, and where is that sort of in the other person. And I often bring up when I'm talking to teachers who are in the middle zone, they're sort of in that 6, 7, 8, 9 years zone, that because they're feeling it from both ends. They're like the Gen X in that, and and they're kind of like, how do I fit and how do I balance all of this? And it really is about just sort of identify where your disquiet is and stay present, and we can kind of see where the map is, because a lot of times everybody's just inheriting the things we haven't worked out yet.
Right.
And so it's that inheritance is manifesting in different ways in the business, in the studio system, in the way classes are taught, all of that. So we're just seeing that inheritance and the ability to kind of just sit back and try to identify where are the gaps, how do we want to fill the gaps, what are the problems, how do we want to solve the problems. We need everyone to solve the problems. We need all the generations of yoga teachers in this case to solve the problems. And so, that's where we need to start working in more collaborative ways and just, sit with the fact that we might be afraid of each other for valid and invalid reasons.
Right.
And just be that.
Oh, that's great. Tell me about like the sort of details of your collective. Like how many yoga teachers are there? How did it first start? Has it evolved to look like something different? Like tell me some of the details, paint the picture of it.
Right. So the first collective that I was involved in was 2006 or 2007. I don't really keep track of dates very well, but that was the first time. And what had happened with that was a whole group of us were teaching all around town, and we were all teaching in one location in this one community hall. And we were subbing for each other all the time, but we were all running independent little fiefdoms, right? And then the church hall was like, we're being renovated, so you guys can't be here. And we were all like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And that was when the four of us kind of came up with this idea to form a collective. And we found a place right down the street that was a dance studio. And I went and talked to the woman and I said, we want to know when you're teaching dance and we'll work around you. And it was actually a perfect synergy because she taught dance in those after school hours. Mm-hmm. And we would be teaching yoga in the mornings and in the evenings. So it was a really perfect balance. And she said, let's split the rent and outgoings for the space, which we decided was a good amount. And we'll run the classes and we'll run one class card and we'll run one banner around our group. And so, we did that. And we transitioned our students from the church hall to down the street to this dance studio. And we had classes at the same time. And then we just sort of expanded it a little bit as well, because a couple of the gyms that we taught at closed. So then the students came over and it just kind of was like a perfect storm, a perfect opportunity for our little group to do that. And our original formation was the four of us. We would have a monthly meeting and we had the 4 jobs. So we had someone on administration, which was making sure we had the calendar right and substitutions and when classes were going on and so on. We had a person who was in charge of marketing. We had a person in charge of accounting and legal and a person in charge of client experience in total. And each month we actually rotated that job because we were just like, let's just see how it works. And so one person would sort of report, we would talk about what we needed to do for the next. Really, we did things about 12 weeks out. And then what's the first month? What's the month 2? What's month 3? And we just kept rolling it. And then we would just pass the packet over to the next person because this was in the time before things were still paper and digital. So we would do some things digitally and some things on paper. And so we'd pass the packet. And so I would get the legal packet, and then I would pass the admin packet to the next person. She'd pass marketing and so on. And after about 3 or 4 months, we all kind of realized, like, I actually hate it when it's my month to do X, right? And I love it when it's my month to do Y. And it turns out that each of us picked a job.
Wow.
And so that made it really streamlined, where every month we were getting together, we were reporting on the past month, we were looking at strategies for the next thing, we were planning out the calendar, and each person had a job, and we were all teaching. And in terms of income, that was when our income was the highest, because what we were doing is we would say, okay, the expenses of rent and outgoings to the dance studio, printing materials for flyers and posters and schedules is part of it, maintaining the website has an expense. Those were basically our expenses. We didn't really have much more beyond that. And we just decided that at the beginning of the month, each of us would pay 1/4 of that cost. We would put that into the central account, and then the person doing the accounting would pay the bills. And so it was that simple. So, and then the other side of that was that we then took home the income that came from the classes. So when a student bought a class card, that went into the bank account. And at the end of the month, I would put in an invoice to the central account that said, these are the classes that I taught. These are the number of people that paid on class card. These are the number that paid on drop-in. And this is the amount I should be paid. So then we would take the payment from that account and dump it into our own personal account and then pay the 1/4 from there. And then it became more streamlined. So I would invoice for what I earned, and then I would deduct my 1/4. So then I'd be paid. And then my 1/4 would be deducted in my invoice. And then that would stay in the main account, and everybody did that. And that's how we would pay the bills. And so it was actually a really efficient way of doing it. And my average class, I was earning between $150 and $200.
Nice. This is so good. I hope our listeners are listening to this collective model and thinking, okay, maybe that's the way.
Right.
I am popping in here for a moment, Connected Yoga Teachers, to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, Yomassage. If you are a massage therapist or a yoga teacher wanting to bring therapeutic touch to your yoga students, have a listen to the work that Yomassage is doing.
Hi, this is Tiffany, co-founder of Yomassage here with your touching moment tip. It's so important to consider the language you use when describing positions. For example, in wide-legged forward fold, instead of saying spread the legs, you might say take the feet wide. It's always helpful to reference the feet instead of the legs or even the knees. In all mindful touch trainings, we discuss trauma-sensitive language, use of body, and other considerations. Additionally, mindful touch practitioners have access to a Yomassage trauma-informed bodywork training that teaches them how to create a safe, therapeutic space to receive mindful touch and enhance their mind-body connection and nervous system regulation. After this additional training is complete, the mindful touch practitioner can specialize in and advertise trauma-informed mindful touch classes. You can find out more about Mindful Touch by Yomassage and our mission to make therapeutic touch accessible at yomassage.com.
Thank you so much, Yomassage, for sponsoring the podcast and bringing us really cool ideas about how we can incorporate touch very mindfully into a yoga class. Also, thank you for moving with the times when we're away from our yoga students right now. I really love this one article that Yomassage put out recently that was all about how to work virtually with your massage clients. So for those of you who do any type of therapeutic touch, Thai yoga massage, and you feel like your students are missing that right now when we're self-isolating, there is an amazing article, and I will make sure to link to it in the show notes. Okay, Connected Yoga Teachers, let's get back to the episode with Jenifer.
So yeah, and this is why it's important, is that I wanted to continue this method because what it does is that the students know that instead of paying a studio, they're paying the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
They're paying their teacher. And if they're going to sub, because they could always do that, they could miss my class and do a makeup class with you, for example, if you were one of my collective members. That's perfectly fine. You get that money that you taught that person in that class. So you get that money, not me. And that makes perfect sense. And it gives the client the opportunity to like, oh, I can't make it. I've got to go to my mother's birthday on this date. Oh, I'm going to have to skip a class and lose the money. No, they could just go to, they could go to Angela's class. Fine. They could go to any class on the schedule. And that just streamlined everything, made it a lot easier to manage the money coming in and the money going out. And cash flow was simple. And then it also helped teachers learn how to develop a class. So when because we did have in our group experienced and newer teachers, the newer teachers were like, Jenifer, how is your class always 20 people and my class is like 3? And we could talk about why that's the case or how we could help. And that allowed us to lead into things like different kinds of support for each other. We would do a lot of reviews of each other's work. It's not reviews in a negative critical sense. It's more of a learning review. So as an example, I would have a teacher come in and I'd say, I'm really struggling with this part of my teaching right now. And these are the questions that I have. Could you observe the class and give me feedback on those questions? And then that teacher observes the class and writes notes on those questions. And then you wait, like you take a timeout. You take about 4 or 5 days timeout. And then you get together and you have coffee. So it's like off-site, you have a coffee, and then they say, here's the things that I saw in your class. It's not judgments, it's not advice. It's just, I noticed that when you said these words, this student, in the purple shorts, like it just didn't click. And, maybe there's something there that you can think about, either your language or is there something with the student or, and these are the ways that the conversation would unfold. And then over time we noticed that we were all kind of having the same problems all at once. Like we're all having the same issue. And that would allow us to get together and talk about, well, how can we do this? How can we improve each other in this process? So that was a really exciting sort of outgrowth from share the work that we don't like to actually now we're cultivating each other as teachers. And it helped younger teachers or newer teachers to cultivate classes where they were making an income that was more sustainable over time, and how to build a class. Because when you're in a studio model where the profit goes to the top, eventually, if there is profit, it goes to the top, and the teacher's paid a flat rate. As a teacher, you just show up. Yeah. One person is the same as 20 people. And so there's not a lot of incentive to learn that really specific skill of how to grow a class and how to develop the relationships to grow your community of students. And so that's one of the real opportunities that this kind of model provides.
I love how you said like the support, the peer review, finding what you were all gifted at doing. I wonder if it was just luck that there were 4 of you and all 4 of you chose different things. Was there, so my guess is, in listening to you, you're not running that model now, and you're not teaching at that dance studio. What has shifted?
So that was before I moved to New Zealand. So at the end of that time, I had my baby, and he was amazing. And I was just sort of teaching a little more ad hoc, just because when you have a baby, the first 3 years of a baby is like, head down in baby land. And so it was pretty intense, but I did teach on the side, and the collective was ongoing for quite a while. But then everybody kind of, after I sort of moved out, so did everyone else. But what we did decide to do was we decided that each one of us had sort of 1/4 shares in this business, in this collective. And so I was able to sort of sell my shares with agreement to the other 3 people in the group. If they liked that teacher, then they would bring that teacher in, and I was able to sell my value of the business, which was actually a really interesting exercise in how do you evaluate the value of your business. And particularly when it's shared among multiple people. And so that was really interesting. And I also had my own business outside of this model, which I consider my own business, which was corporate classes and private clients and things like that. So I actually sold off all my business in some capacity mostly in bundles. So I would say, oh, these 3 corporate classes are a bundle and they're worth this much. And I'd sell them to that teacher. And then these 3 are for that. And I'd sell them to that teacher. So my business was chopped into little bite-sized pieces and sold off to a bunch of different people. And then I moved to New Zealand. And when I moved to New Zealand, I wanted to start a collective here, but nobody knew me. So, and also nobody knew what a collective model was. They knew what a co-op was, which has a very different legal structure. But I was like, I don't want to do a co-op. I actually want to do a collective, because the co-op's legal structure is very specific and very intense. And you like having a charity, you have very specific legal standards. Whereas when you form a company, you can kind of form it however you want. It's a very loose and open structure. How you divide shares, who has what kinds of powers, that can change and fluctuate every year, every month, every quarter. You just update it. You just update the company record.
Right.
So it's a much more flexible method from a legal standpoint. It's a really flexible method. And so I wanted to form a collective, but there were no takers. So I ended up running a traditional studio model, and I was teaching the majority of the classes, and I had a minority of the classes taught by other teachers just to help free up my schedule a little bit. And I paid them a flat rate, which was the highest rate in the city, because I still believe in paying a fair rate. But I also felt like this is not really the model that I want to do. And what I also noticed is that as I decreased the number of classes I taught and classes were taught by other teachers, I was actually earning less, because their classes would shrink and my classes would sort of increase or stay the same. And so what I found is that oftentimes I was losing money on those classes. So it was just this really unbalanced system. It just was like so out of whack, where I was just like, wow, I feel like I'm not paying them enough, even though it's the highest rate in the city, but also like they're not earning enough and I'm not able to teach enough to earn enough for everything to kind of click.
Yes.
So ran a regular studio model. And then after I kind of bent my mind to like, okay, I have to dig in and use this model the way it is, because that's what everybody expects and that's what everybody's comfortable with. I just like bit the bullet and was like, fine, I'll run a yoga studio in the normal yoga studio way with the profit at the top, like in the ways that I don't like to do. But I did bite the bullet, and we were quite successful, and I was able to kind of maintain people and pay people, but it got really, really challenging because we didn't have the support mechanisms. So a lot of the things that I would offer people of like, hey, we can do these kinds of supports. Hey, I offered a free teacher training every quarter that teachers could come to and they could bring questions. And I had one that I tried that was like open source, where it's like teachers from all over the city could come. And if you wanted to teach something to the group, or the group wanted to learn what you do, that's cool. That's how we'll do it. But nobody came.
Right.
So it was like, I could either pay them to come so that I could kind of enforce that, which would be the legally correct thing to do. And also morally, if you're demanding people come to a meeting or demanding that they come to a training, you pay them to come, right, if you are paying them. And so that was not, I couldn't afford to pay them to come. So I was like, well, I'll offer it for free. And that could be an added bonus. They can take it or leave it. And they mostly left it. I think the real heartbreak for me was not only did they leave it, but they also then were in other studio systems where the studio owners was like, right, if you want to work here, you have to take one training a quarter and it's going to cost you $250. Wow. And they were like, you get the base pay for this many students. And at this point you get this greater pay. And yoga teachers was like coming to me like, I just can't make a living. I just can't make a living. I'm like, well, have you done your numbers? Because you're getting paid $25 a class and you only teach 10 classes a quarter at this studio, and then she makes you take a $250 training. So pays you and you pay her back. Like it's, and so that was when I started to talk to people about like, there's actual usury in the system. There's a morally, there's a thing that's not right. And there's a lot of, you need to attend, the newer incarnation that I saw was like, not only do you have to come to the $250 quarterly training, but now you also have to come to class twice a week. So you have to buy the teacher class card, which costs you $15 a class instead of $18 a class. So then when you do the numbers, if you don't do both of those things, you won't be put on the roster. Now all the yoga teachers are in the hole.
Right. Exactly. I've seen this happen.
They're not breaking even. They're now in the negative.
Yeah.
And it's all under this veneer of like, yoga is about service in our community, and it's all about serving your community, and you shouldn't be worried about money, which is perfectly fine for, the person whose husband is a doctor or partner works in IT and makes, so much money, and it doesn't matter. And the studio is a side gig that was based on grandma's inheritance, it's like, it's fine for that person. But for the person who literally can't pay their rent, it's not fine. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I wanted to go into, again, the next incarnation. I started to open up the conversation in the community of like, hey, we can form a collective. And that took a long time to get going. And that's what happened last year. Last year, I was like, hey, we should form a collective, because I was in a situation where I needed to homeschool my son, and all of a sudden, like, the work of the studio and taking care of my son's needs were 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need help, and I want to form a collective. And is there anybody who wants to do this? And so for about 6 months, I had met with a bunch of people to decide. I explained the model and explained how it worked. And I showed them all my books, and I showed them how the business was currently working and what the income was and what the cash flow looks like. And I said, but if we work together, we can bolster this and help each other, and everybody get benefits, and everybody will eventually get paid more. But it might take a year or 2 for that to happen. And I ended up in January with one person who said, yes, I want to join the collective at the structural level. And I had another couple of people who were like, I want to join the collective, but like, not right now. Is there a way we can sort of have a intermediate step? And so we came up with that intermediate step, which was a profit share. Or income share, really. It wasn't profit share. So when a student came into class, the teacher would take this percentage and the studio would take that percentage. And that was like a nice halfway point for people. And that was really, really great. So we have several teachers who were on that journey. And then there were the 2 of us who were on the journey of like cultivating the collective.
Right.
So now we're about a year later from there, and everybody in the group at every layer has had something else happen outside of the studio, something else that's big, maybe medical, maybe family, what have you. So everybody was like, and we really we're like really struggling to kind of meet and really struggling to get together and make everything work. And our lease was up, so that was the big discussion we needed to have. And the other person that I was in the collective with, he was just like, look, I'm overwhelmed and I need to step away. And I was like, cool. So now I'm back in the legal structure by myself.
Right.
But socially, we're still in the collective model. And so now where we are is we had a conversation about, do we want to maintain premises? Can we maintain premises under the situation that we're in now? And since our lease was up, I just was like, honestly, like, I can't be the sole holder of this. Right. If we are going to maintain premises, you need to come into the legal side. And they were all like, we really don't want to. So I was like, okay. And we then just decided to let go of premises and become a lighter studio in that way. So in a way, it's like going all the way back to the beginning where we were all in the church hall.
Right. Like, you don't own a studio now. How is that then? Like, have you had problems finding places to have yoga classes? Are your students confused? Like, where is class now?
So we actually haven't fully launched. We've just announced that this is what we're doing.
Okay.
And the students have been really responsive, really, really positively responsive, because I've just been transparent. I've been like, look, y'all know me. And I'm running like crazy right now. and that I'm homeschooling, and and my one student, she just spoke up. She's like, look, things change.
Mm-hmm.
That's so what true. This is. She's like, things change, and this is just change. And she's like, and because some of the students are like, oh, that's a shame. And I finally said, you know what? I think it might be a shame for you because it's convenient for you to come here, but it's actually real positive for me. And it's really positive for the other teachers because we're all like, oh, okay. So like now instead of our expenses being this, you know, they're just this. That right. feels doable. And now it feels like, okay. And so we just announced to them, like, this is the date that the lease is done, and this is the last class, and we're going to have a celebratory party because we've been in premises for 10 years.
Wow.
So that's a big deal.
It is.
And like, you know, so we're going to celebrate that we did 10 years here. And they said, and the next thing is we're going to be taking a break, and we're starting in February because here it's summer. So December and January is summer vacation, Christmas, holidays. It's all of that. And
so bizarre.
It's not the same as in the US or in Canada where it's winter. So on January 1st, people are doing their resolutions. You know what I mean? They want to do the big burn 4-hour yoga class to like set their world straight. No, like here they're like, yeah, going to a festival. Woo!
Right.
Out of the bed. Gone for 6 weeks. And now, yeah, I mean, and that's common. And so for years I would, as an American, I'd be like, oh my God, like I can't close at Christmas. Christmas is like, because in the States, I'd actually make good money at Christmas.
Yes.
And New Year's. And like I could, and here I'd be like teaching a class of 2 people. I'd be like, it's costing me money to be here. Like, what is it? So this year I was like, okay, Jenifer just needs a little timeout. She just needs a little bit of a timeout. And the other teacher was like, my other teachers are holding me accountable because they're like, Americans overwork themselves and you in particular overwork yourself. So we're holding you accountable. And I will get a Facebook message, you know, once a week from my one teacher. She's like, did any of those corporates call you? Do they want January? Because you're not teaching in January. Remember, you're not teaching in January. And so they're actually holding me accountable to not teach in January, which is again, that layer of support that comes out of the collective is they sort of know my foibles. So they're sitting there and supporting me to have a vacation. So
that's really nice.
I know. So back to the students, we made this announcement. We said, you can choose to have a corporate class, in which case you'll contact us through your company and this is how it works. Or you can come to our public classes. And we're having these classes in the CBD. We found a church that has a church hall that we were able to rent, and they did a nice deal for us. And we're like, this is where we're going in the CBD. And then I moved out of the CBD into a neighborhood, and I'm teaching another class here in the neighborhood. And that is on the website and part of the pop-up. And the other teacher is doing is probably going to do the same in one of her neighborhoods. But she's like, I'll just focus on the CBD for now, and we'll build from there. And then we have a whole bunch of corporate clients trying to come in. So we've got a lot of new interest in having corporates. And just in the last quarter, I've done 3 pilot programs on corporates, which is 6 to 12 week programs. It depends. We usually do 6 weeks and then they decide. But these groups, some of them did 2 pilot programs back to back, and then some of them just did 1 spread out over the quarter. And then I said, okay, if you guys want to continue, you know, let me know. And they all do want to continue. And then I've also gotten 3 emails in the last week, like, hey, we're interested in the pilot program. And I'm just like, I'm about to go on vacation.
You just have to have that day, like, okay, well, we're back to the office on this day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, those boundaries are good.
I've been sort of organizing that, and the students have been really, really positive. And what we've done is our transitional measures, we're going to take registrations for the class, which is sort of new for us. We're like, you're signing up for Tuesday at 5:30 for February.
Right.
And then in March, we'll do March, and we'll just do it month by month. And then if we get enough people in each class, then we'll probably do a subscription so we can just roll it over. But it's, again, we're just experimenting. If there aren't enough people, we're not going to hold the class. If there are enough people, we will hold the class. And the students have been exceptionally supportive about it and keen, and they've all already done their maps from where they work to the new location. And one student came in with a map, and she's like, you see, if you go this way, you cut off the hypotenuse It was really cute. She's like an engineer. So she was explaining. And, I just thought it was the best thing. So they're even supporting each other in the change and encouraging each other to not worry about the change. And they've made suggestions. I was like, I've booked the studio, or I booked the church hall in my neighborhood for Saturday morning between 8 and 10, and I don't know when to start. And they were like, why don't we just check the bus schedule? So we checked the bus schedule. And I was like, oh, well, that's really great to know that at 8:25, at 8:15 and 8:25, the bus drops off a block from the church hall. So I was like, well, then clearly we need to start at 8:30.
Right.
Like it just answered the question for us. So we're like, great, that'll be at 8:30 then. And everybody was happy with that. So it's a really, it's been, in a lot of ways, it's been very supportive and very collaborative from the students. And then the other teachers who are continuing with us, some of them are like, I just want to do corporates for you. So we pay them from the money that comes in from the corporate, and they go pay that. So it is more like a traditional contractor.
Right.
But we do pay them, because we don't have a huge overhead, we do pay them quite high. And we just keep a percentage to cover just administrative costs, the website and the marketing and the email time and things like that to set things up. And then the other teacher and I are doing the public classes, and we're open to expanding that to other teachers who want to come in under our branding and do work with us. But right now we're just like, we're just going on vacation in a few weeks. So we're tying up premises, we're washing the walls, and, finding homes for the furnishings and things like that. And teaching the classes and just partying, basically. It's like, it's like school's out, right? It's like school's getting out for summer, and that's what it feels like. And that's kind of how everybody's treating it. And they're like, oh yeah, see you in February, that's kind of, see you when school starts again, have a great summer. And that's sort of the feel that it has right now. So it's actually been an easy transition. And students have been really supportive. Like I was like, oh, maybe I'll come up with a special deal for the last 4 weeks. Like I couldn't get my head around it because so much is happening that I just was like, guys, class cards will end on this date. You can do drop-in, you can buy a class card. I don't care, just whatever. But they all end on this date. And I've had people class card finish last week, or, this week was the last class on the class card. And then there's only 3 weeks left. And they're like, I'll buy a 4-class card. I can do 4 classes in 3 weeks. So they're still buying the class card anyway.
Even though they know it expires. It sounds like they're super, well, the one thing is, it sounds like they're doing their yoga practice because they're fluid with this change. Like they sound, and what a nice community. Like this is obviously the way it needs to work. And I love how you were very transparent. I was part of a yoga studio that closed, and basically in a couple of weeks, and it was very, everything was kind of kept hidden from the community of students and a lot of the teachers. And it was just like, okay, the teachers found out, and then the students found out. And there were some pretty upset people because they had felt like they hadn't been kept in the loop of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And we started talking about this in July and August among the teachers. The final decision was made in September. We then did the background preparatory stuff of what's going to be the last day. Let's talk to the landlord to make sure that all those ends are tied off. Let's do all the sort of background work stuff, and then decide what the plan is for next year, create that plan so that we had something to tell them. And then basically in first week of November, we told everyone, and posted it inside the studio. And it's just been really, and I think that's part of it. It's been really positive. And people would come in for their class, and I would tell them at the end of class. And I think another thing that really helped was we had key students, sort of leadership style students who've been with us a long time, who have real ownership of the community. Like they unlock the doors. Like if they're there early, they like unlock the door, turn on the light, put the aromatherapy in, clean the bath. Like they do everything. Aww. And then I show up, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll teach now, So they have real sort of emotional ownership of the studio. And they've been saying things like, oh, change is great and this will be good. And, because I think that some of them really know the work that goes behind the scenes because they've seen me. Right. Or they've seen other teachers with, pull the vacuum cleaner out and pull off the air ventilation system and vacuum inside there. They've seen us do that. So it's been great that that community is really formed. And my Saturday community, not only were they checking the bus schedule, but the one was like, well, I'm coming from this neighborhood and I can pick you up, and then I'll swoop around and I'll pick you up, and then I can pick you up, and then I'll swoop around there and I'll pick you up, and then we'll just all carpool. I'm like, do you guys need to borrow my van? Because I think that's 8 people. I'm like, my van fits 7. You can borrow my van. I'll drop it off at your house on Friday night, and then take the bus home. And then, so we have this like ongoing joke about it, but that really is who the community is that they've, our classes have always been really small. So they've been under 15 people. People come once or twice a week, so they see each other very regularly. And a lot of them have become friends. They meet for lunch and stuff like that outside of the studio. And that's part of it. They're encouraging each other to continue. And they've been encouraging to us of like, that sounds great. This is exciting. Do you need help? Do you want to give that plant stand to me? And I'm like, yes, I do. I do. At your leisure.
Is there anything, if yoga teachers are thinking about starting a collective in some way, are there some tips that you would tell them? Like, make sure you just consider this, or things that you learned the hard way?
The hardest thing is making sure that you have really clear communication with the people that you're working with, right? Because people come with their own assumptions, and they often will put their own interpretation on things. Mm-hmm. So we had a person who was into the collective, so into it, and I'm giving all the information. And at the last minute, he's like, you never told me that. And I was like, and everybody else was like, wait, no, she did tell us that like 14 times. In fact, it's on page 3, paragraph 6, right there, And that was the sort of thing where one of the things that you really have to make sure of is that there's a lot of transparency, that you're very clear in what you're communicating and what the responsibilities are, because this person had thought that he was coming in to help manage us, that we just needed his support in how to direct workflow. But that's not reality. Like, no, I didn't need someone to manage the business. I needed someone to actually do work inside the business, because he was like, well, a newsletter is really great. A newsletter will help you. A newsletter is what you need to do. And I'm like, great, write a newsletter. Feel free. Right. I don't have time to write a newsletter, so feel free. And he's like, no. I was just saying we need to do this. I'm like, okay, so which one of us? We're all busy. We all have our assignments. So if a newsletter is important to you, that's your project. And that was when he was like, nobody told me it was going to be like this. Nobody told me I had to work.
That it's going to be a work share.
Right. So there's a part of it where you have to really pay attention to the communication that's going both ways. And if you've got a feeling that something's not clicking, or that the person's not getting it, or even if it's like a shadow way back behind you that something just feels off, like check it out, like check that out. Because that can kind of derail a lot of stuff and make things more challenging down the line. And particularly if you're forming the legal formation. Now, the legal formation of a company with directors and shares is actually really easy to manage, because all a person has to do is resign their shares. Right. And you can ask for that. Can you resign your shares? Or we can, as a board or as a group of directors, elect to remove that person and take back their shares. But it would have to be a majority vote and things like that. So it does make it easy to get a person out if you need to. A cooperative and a partnership, that is not easy. If you're in a partnership or a cooperative, you have to dissolve the cooperative to get a person out most of the time. Same with a partnership. In a partnership, you have to dissolve the partnership, which means your whole business is gone, right? So from a legal structure, the forming a company is much easier to manage, getting people in and getting people out. Like, that's much easier.
Who helped you with the legal side of things?
Me. Yeah. So my background is that I trained in law in the US. So I have a legal degree, a Juris Doctorate, from a university that focused on corporate law. So even though my actual emphasis at the time was alternative dispute resolution, which is one of my other things, I love negotiation and arbitration and things like that. That was where I went into. The other side of it was predominantly corporate law and understanding how corporate law worked. And so while I never practiced law sort of in an official way, I decided not to take the bar. I went into a little bit of policy research. Alternative dispute resolution, mediation, and negotiation doesn't require that you pass the bar. It's just a sort of different animal. So I went into that, and I did that for a couple of years. And then I was making less money doing that than I was teaching yoga. So I was just like, I'll just teach yoga. I'll just do that. And so now every time I have a project, I'm like, what are the legal parameters of this project?
Right.
I bought my house, I renovated it. It's on a piece of land that's called a leasehold, which means that each of the 3 owners of the 3 flats have an interest in the business, which means we have to have a democratic agreement to if we do anything like mend a fence. And so the funny thing is that like right now I'm like, okay, we need to mend the fence. How do I, as a leaseholder, convince my fellow leaseholdees to mend the fence under the law? So this is my whole sort of outlook on the world. Is like I kind of go, well, what are the principles around this so that we can flexibly work together? And I have this kind of in my back pocket that I know what the standards are.
Right.
So
that's a real asset to the team. I would say the majority of, there are some yoga teachers that I know, actually there are quite a few that I've interviewed that were a lawyer and then decided to teach yoga and bring that with them, but not everyone gets excited.
Accountants. So if you can find a lawyer who's now a yoga teacher or an accountant who's now a yoga teacher, those are good people to get on your team.
Right. For the collective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is that you can always hire someone. So it's like in my case, I've hired accountants from the beginning because accounting can be quite delicate, particularly once I moved from the US to New Zealand. It's totally different taxation. It's totally different ways of doing things. And taxation is actually really important to get right. So
it is.
It's really important. So it's one of those things where I had an accountant for a couple of years, and I just was like, I'm paying this accountant a ton of money, and I have no idea why. Like, I don't even know what they're doing. And so I changed to another accountant in this last year, and she's just been phenomenal. Like, I'm like, take my money, please, just take it. Just here's all please, because she explains what she's doing, why she's doing it, how it fits, what needs to be done. And then she'll come in and go, okay, so, and she started with us with the collective. So when that one person was like, you never said that, she has all of the information. She's like, not only did she say that, but she's done beyond her legal standard of what's required for her to share with you. Like, she's not required to share what she shared. And she shared like way more than legally needed to encourage you to join the business. And so just having a person who's not me saying that, who is an industry professional with a fiduciary duty to the company, it just builds your ethos, right? It builds the ethos of what's happening. So a good way to do it is to just find someone who can help and who's affordable. My accountant costs me $14 a month to just run my Xero, which I pay $50 for on top of that, so I can keep track of the accounts and I can see how it's all going. If I have a question, I can just ask her and she'll answer it. And then when she does all the taxes and all the sort of specialized work she does, it's a couple $100. I mean, it's really not that much. And a lot of lawyers will do the same thing. It's like you just pay sort of a little retaining fee. And if you have a question, you can kind of go to them. Others will be like, here's how you form a company and here are the principles. And then quite frankly, like, Google is there for you. Google is a really good friend. And also, you can go into a group like your group and ask, and then I'll Google for you.
I know. Yeah. You're great to post in the group. I definitely want to hear how this goes. So I would love to hear an update on how things go once you guys get rolling as well.
Yeah, I think I feel positive about how it's going so far. And what's interesting as well is that we've moved from the location we are to a new location, and half of our students were like, oh my God, that's closer. That's closer to where I work. Now more of my coworkers will come. And my partner's company is literally like sort of diagonal from it. And they've been trying to get a corporate class for ages, but just haven't been able to sort it. And now my partner's like, we can just go across the street to the classes. You have to register. So he actually today was like, I'm going to go put that on the company thing and put it on the calendar and like put it out. So people because there is a core group of people, but they felt that walking 10 minutes that way was too far. But if they go 2 minutes across the street, that's like golden, right? So we might see an increase by doing this.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So what is the website that people would go if they want to check out what your website looks like with this collective?
Right. So that is healium.co.nz, which is HEALIUM.
Thank you so much for all of this today. This is a lot of information. And I love how you looked at this like, here's the problem, here's a solution. Let's try it and let's be fluid with it. So thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Yeah. And it does work, but it also means you do have to do the work of it. And that's the thing I tell people too. Business isn't something to be afraid of. A lot of yoga teachers are afraid of business, but really business is just like cultivating a garden. Once you understand what the soil is and what the light is, you find the right plant and you put it in the right place and you've got a good garden. And then you tend it, you tend it. You do the composting, you do the watering, you do the fertilizing, you do the pruning. As long as you maintain, the garden's going to be beautiful. And that's exactly what happens. And I know from my own experience, I have been afraid of parts of my business, accounting being one of them. I've been afraid of parts of my business. And I have been like, no, I'll be like an ostrich. I'm not taking care of that. And then the whole thing overgrows. And you're like, oh, why am I smothered by this invasive weed? It's because you didn't pay attention. Right. And that's all it is. It's just focus, do the work, a little bit every day. You'll get there.
That's so good. Oh, I love the analogy of the garden. Thank you so much, Jenifer.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you again, Jenifer, for your time and wisdom. It was so interesting to hear about this collective yoga studio model. Connected yoga teachers, I want to hear from you. Was there something in today's episode where you thought, oh, wow, I can take a piece of that back into my own yoga business or use this in some way? Is anyone out there currently using the collective yoga studio model? I would love to hear from you in the comments of our show notes. So go to the connectedyogateacher.com/163 to leave a comment, to tell us about your studio model, to tell us about an idea that you are going to take into your own yoga business. Lastly, I wanted to share a few things that are really helping me right now, just in case they might help you. So I have really been giving some thought around the waves of emotions that are coming in for me with everything that's going on with COVID-19. And it gives me a lot of comfort to know that the wave is going to come and then go. And also, I've put a sticky note up in our kitchen for my family to remind me, because I feel like in this time, it is helpful to let people know that it is my intention to try and find grace, understanding, and kindness in this time. So those are the 3 words that I was really rooting to this weekend. I turned both my computer and my phone off almost all weekend and did a painting project with my daughter Sage. And that was really good to just dig into that and be away from technology, the news, checking in with things. I know that all of that will be there. And the other thing that I did was a few video calls. So my mom arranged for a video call today with a bunch of family members, and that was so fun. And as I get ready to close out this episode, I also really realize the importance of feeling like there's a big why to the work that I do. So there have been a lot of yoga teachers in the last few weeks reaching out, more than I can even reach back to, which is sometimes overwhelming for me. I like to really have conversations with yoga teachers and email you back or message you back on social media, and things have flooded in so much that I can't at this point answer every single email or message, which does bother me. But I know that what I can do is focus on something like this. I can focus on an episode where we can connect in this time, and I can share as much as possible. And that's really what I'm looking at doing with all of the content that I'm creating. How can I serve the yoga teachers around the world that are doing amazing work? So some of those things might be helpful for you, or you may be finding other things that really help you to cope with everything that is going on in real time, connected yoga teachers. I want you to know that you are in my thoughts even when I cannot reach back out and answer your email right away. Also, a tremendous thank you to our team over here at the Connected Yoga Teacher. They are doing so much behind the scenes and also so much out in the world. Suzanne, Crunch, Nick, and Sinead, thank you for all of the work that you do. Connected Yoga Teachers, I would love to ask you, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, to your practice, and to your community, so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?